how to factor equations in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c to find the initial binomial. So first what you have to do is just the basic steps are to take out any common factors or greatest common factors. Next, you have to find the two numbers that will add to give you b. And multiply to give you AC. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, you will find out in a minute. Once you find those two factors, you replace them with b, you split the equation apart, and then you group them. We'll be using the grouping method. And then you factor out the greatest common factors in those groups, and then you are left with your binomial. So let's see how this works in the first example. First example is 3x squared plus 16x plus 5. So the first step, like we said before, is to take out a GCF. 3, 16, and 5. We don't have a GCF. So what we do is we multiply, this is A right here. This is C. We're going to multiply AC. 3 times 5 is 15. And B is 16. So we need to find a number that adds to give us 16 and multiplies to give us 15. So those two numbers are 15 and 1, if you couldn't figure those out. I mean, 15 plus 1 is 16. 15 times 1 is 15. So what we do is now we're going to split b into 15x plus x in order to factor. So we'll rewrite it as 3x squared plus 15x plus x plus 5. And then we group like this. And now we're going to take out the GCF of each grouping, and then we'll be left with our binomials eventually. So the GCF of this one is 3x, because there's an x right here, so you can take the x out, and there's as well as an x here, and 3 goes into 15. So you take out the 3x, and then if you take out 3x, you're left with x, because 3x times x is 3x squared. And if you take out 3x from here, the x goes away, and then you're left with 5. And now the greatest common factor here is 1, so we don't really need to write 1, but there's an imaginary 1 here, and it's just going to be also x plus 5 again. So now that we have that, what we do is we take this number and the number in between the groupings, and that becomes our first group. And this sign is also very important, because if it's a negative, then it needs to be subtraction. So we'll just rewrite this up here. Three x plus 1 is our first grouping. And then the next grouping, these should match. They should be the same. The next grouping is just the same grouping, goes up here. And that's how you factor a trinomial. And in order to make sure you got it correct, you need to check by foiling. So FOIL first, outside, inside, last. We all know how to FOIL. 3x squared plus 15x plus x plus 5. You're going to be left, once you simplify, 3x squared plus 16x plus 5. And that's what you started with. So we know we did it correct. Second example, this one's a little bit trickier because we are going to have to arrange it first. So the given equation, or trinomial, is not written in the standard form. It's 8x plus 24 equals 2x squared. Now, if you're ever given something like this, you want to make sure you move all of the elements onto one side and set it equal to 0, and you always want to keep the x squared positive. So we want to move this to the other side. So in order to rewrite that, then we'd keep the 2x squared positive, and then we would subtract 8x plus 24. So then we just change the signs. So minus 8x minus 24 equals 0. We don't really need to write that. So that's our new, rewrite the binomial, or the trinomial up here, so I have more room. Oh, that's not it. Again. 2x squared minus 8x minus 24. And the first step is to always take out the GCF. So the GCF in this case, so there's a 2 here, an 8 here, and a 24 here. So you can take out 2. So if you take out 2, you're just dividing it by 2, so it's going to be negative 4, or minus 4x, and then minus 12. And what I always do is I just work with what's on in the inside of the parentheses, and then I just remember, like I put a star up here or something, and I remember that I need to put this 2 back at the end of my trinomial, or when I get the two binomials, or the binomial, I guess. So now we're going to work with what's inside the parentheses. So AC is negative 12, B is negative 4, and we need to find two numbers that multiply to give us negative 12 and add to equal negative 4. So we know that the negative number in the two, there has to be a negative and a positive in order to multiply to be a negative number. We know the negative is going to be the bigger number because it's a negative number when they add together. So our two factors, if you don't know how to find the factors, what I suggest is just going through the factors of negative 12. So you have 1 and negative 12, or negative 12, or sorry, negative 1 and 12. Either way, those don't add either way. Then you have 2 and 6. One of them can be negative. We want the bigger one to be negative. And does that add to equal negative 4? Yes, it does. So those are our two factors. So if your A is 1, then the factors automatically create the binomial. You don't even need to do this step right here, which is what I actually did on my paper when I was planning this out. So I know that the factors are negative 6 and 2, so I just don't even need to do this part. Now what I do is I just write two binomials, and then it's going to be x on each part, because this is only when A is equal to 1. Now I do x minus 6, because that's the first one, and then x plus 2 is the second one. Make sure that you have any GCFs you write on the outside, and that is your final answer. This one is 18x squared minus 48x plus 32. So if you got this on a test and you're just looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, those are huge numbers, and I'm not going to multiply 18 by 32. You're right, you're not going to, because first thing you do is take out the GCF, which sadly is only 2, but still it helps a lot. Take out 2, then you're left with 9x squared minus 24x plus 16. That's a terrible plus, so I'm going to rewrite that. Okay, now you have to, I remember I just star this that I know to put at the end. 9 times 16 AC is 144, and our B is negative 24. And you might be sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, these are big numbers, I don't want to do this, like the whole factor thing. But if you look at them, what number correlates between those two numbers? You automatically think of 12 when you see 144 and 24. At least I think of 12 automatically. So you know that it has to be two negative numbers, because they have to add to equal a negative, but they have to multiply to equal a positive. So the numbers are, if you haven't figured them out yet, negative 12 and negative 12, because they multiply to equal 144 and add to give you negative 24. So we know that we need to split b up into negative 12 and negative 12. So we rewrite what's inside the parentheses as 9x squared minus 12x minus 12x, because when you combine like terms, it's going to equal that, plus 16. And then we're going to group. And when we group, we take out a 3x here. And remember, what's inside the parentheses when you're left should be the same, and if not, there's something wrong. 3x minus 4, because negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. And then you can, from this group, you can take out a negative 4. You want it to equal the same thing that you have here. So I wouldn't, even if you can take out something else, like if it's negative on the inside, you want to take it out. So we're taking out a negative 4. And then you're left with 3x minus 4. And you're thinking, this comes together with this to make 1, and then this is the other, but they're the same. What do you do? Well, it's quite simple actually. Don't forget this GCF. I'm just going to erase this bottom part right here. So we had 3x minus 4 and 3x minus 4. If you write that, and a simpler way to write that, and probably the best way, is 3x minus 4 squared. It's the same thing, 3x minus 4 times 3x minus 4. And don't let the x's fool you, it's just one component times itself. So it's still squaring it, it's just a bigger component than like normal numbers, what we're used to seeing. For instance, 2 squared is still 2 times 2. It's a component, you can still write an exponent onto it. It's fine. So, and then we have to remember to put the GCF on the outside. So your final answer is 2 times 3x minus 4 squared. We're going to check to make sure that we did it correctly. So I'm just going to erase this whole thing. The final answer was 3x minus 4 squared. And we have to remember when we're squaring something, we don't just square one element and then we square the other and that's our answer. We have to remember to write it out and FOIL it. So we get 9x squared minus 12x minus 12x plus 16, combine like terms. And the whole thing is times 2, and so you're going to, the final answer is going to be what you started with. It's a good way to check. I think that you should definitely check, especially if you're uncertain about an answer. But yeah, that is how you factor trinomials.